The Lancaster family's annual executive summit was a spectacle of wealth and legacy, held on the top floor of their San Diego headquarters, a glass-walled space overlooking the marina. It had been 6 years since I last stepped foot in this building. I was 24 then, fresh out of grad school with dual degrees in finance and systems engineering. That was also the day my application was publicly rejected by my aunt, Victoria Lancaster. Today, I returned, not as Ava Chen, the dismissed outsider, but as CEO of VXC Holdings, quietly the Lancaster Group's largest client, funneling over $60 million, 0 cents, a year through their logistics division. They just didn't know it was me. "The quarterly report looks promising," said my cousin Marcus, clicking through another over-designed PowerPoint deck. "Thanks in large part to our anchor client, VXC Holdings." I sipped my espresso to mask the grin tugging at my lips. I remembered Marcus's voice from 6 years ago. "Come on, Ava. You're smart, but you don't really belong in a place like this. Family loyalty and pedigree matter here." Victoria beamed proudly. "Excellent analysis, Marcus. This is why we keep leadership in the bloodline." In the bloodline. I glanced down at the real numbers on my tablet. Data quietly pulled from internal files through a friendly whistleblower. Marcus had been falsifying performance metrics for nearly a year. Losses hidden, shortfalls patched. The only thing keeping Lancaster Group alive was my company's contracts. "Michelle?" A soft voice drew my attention. Victoria's assistant, Mila, gestured toward the boardroom doors. "They're ready for your presentation." I rose, adjusting the lapel of my deep navy suit. Tailored, precise. A stark contrast to the off-rack dress I wore when I begged for a seat here years ago. Back then, Victoria had said I didn't look like Lancaster material. As I reached the podium, Marcus's voice echoed across the room. "Ava, what are you doing here? This is a closed board meeting." I looked across the long mahogany table, pausing on each puzzled face. "I'm here on behalf of VXC Holdings. We need to renegotiate several contract terms before renewal." The room stilled. Victoria narrowed her eyes. "That's not how this works. VXC always sends a representative from the external group." I smiled. "They do? And you're looking at her." Silence. Marcus looked like he'd forgotten how to blink. My cousin Elise dropped her stylus. The weight of realization crept across their faces. "That's not possible," Victoria choked. You run a small startup. We did a full background check." I tapped my screen, projecting my own slide deck. "This startup was a front. VFC Holdings, formerly Vega X Consulting, is mine. I've owned and run it for the past 6 years." Gasps broke the silence. And just like that, the girl they dismissed had become the woman their empire now depended on. The first slide lit up with clean-cutting clarity. VXC Holdings audited financials. Annual revenue, triple that of Lancaster Group. Offices in 12 countries. A global footprint that dwarfed their regional presence. And beneath that, a client list featuring 9 Fortune 500 companies. I heard someone gasp. "No." Marcus lurched to his feet, visibly pale. "That's not possible. You can't be—" "Can't be what?" I asked, voice steady. "The same woman you mocked at the internship mixer? The niece who wasn't Lancaster enough? Or the owner of the company currently keeping your books from bleeding red?" Murmurs broke out across the boardroom. "We wouldn't known," Marcus insisted. "Would you?" I arched an eyebrow. "The same way you knew about the $8,200,000, 0 cents, hidden through inventory manipulation and deferred revenue schemes?" His jaw slackened. Around him, board members turned to each other, whispering furiously. "I've spent the last 6 years turning VXC Holdings into what it is today," I said coolly. "While you all clinked glasses over keeping me out of your club, I was quietly becoming your lifeline." And Victoria's knuckles whitened as she gripped the armrests. "Why come forward now?" I clicked to the next slide. An analysis of Lancaster Group's dependency on VXC. It wasn't subtle. 82% of their logistics revenue. 70% of new growth. Over half their remaining client retention initiatives rode on infrastructure VXC controlled. Because it's time to renegotiate, I said, and based on what I've uncovered, I'm not sure there's much left to salvage. You can't just walk away, Marcus stammered. Those contracts are up for renewal in 5 business days, I cut in. And as CEO of VXC, I have serious concerns about Lancaster Group's stability. Your stability, cousin. The room exploded. Board members demanded explanations. Victoria shot Marcus a death glare. Elise muttered something about corporate liability. I remained still, calm, composed. Let the storm hit them first. I'll be calling an emergency audit meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m., I said, gathering my tablet and notes. My team will present a full forensic breakdown of your finances. I suggest you show up prepared. This is revenge, Marcus accused, voice trembling. Because we didn't give you a seat at the table. I paused at the doorway. The memory of that rejection 6 years ago still echoed. His smug face, Victoria's cold stare, the laughter that followed when I walked out with my head held high but heart in pieces. No, Marcus, this isn't revenge, I said, looking him dead in the eye. This is business. The very thing you claimed I'd never understand. I glanced at my watch. 9 sharp. Don't be late. Though punctuality never really ran in your side of the family, did it? As I stepped into the hallway, the voices behind me fractured into accusations. Victoria's calm cracked. Marcus tried, again, to justify the numbers. My assistant, Michael, was waiting by the elevator. He held out a bottle of sparkling water. How'd it go? Exactly as planned, I said, stepping inside. If you thought that boardroom twist was satisfying, trust me, you won't want to miss what happens at tomorrow's audit meeting. Hit subscribe and I'll take you inside, the moment everything finally comes crashing down. I stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the lobby. Is everything ready for tomorrow? I asked. Full audit reports, full breakdown of Marcus's financial manipulation, and a dependency analysis that'll make their stomachs turn, Michael replied with a calm grin. They won't know what hit them. I thought about Aunt Victoria's face when the realization had dawned, about Marcus, panicked and pale, scrambling to hold up numbers that had never been real, about the years they'd whispered behind my back, saying I wasn't a fit for the Lancaster legacy, that I lacked the pedigree, that I didn't belong. Send me the latest draft of the termination letter, I told Michael. I want my eyes on it before tomorrow. You're really going to pull out of all the contracts? He asked. I smiled. Let's just say they'll finally understand what earned power looks like. Tomorrow, they'll learn what real business is. The next morning, I arrived at Lancaster Group's headquarters an hour early, the same building that had once turned me away. The lobby guard, same guy from 6 years ago, stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his coffee. Miss Chen? Welcome. He hesitated. The board's already gathering upstairs. Early, I murmured. Funny what the smell of collapse does to people. As I stepped into the executive elevator, the polished chrome reflected back someone they never saw coming. The woman they'd pushed aside was about to hold the pen over their fate. The boardroom was packed when I entered. Silence blanketed the air. Victoria sat at the head, her presence hallowed. Marcus sat hunched beside the corporate lawyers, flanked by tension and denial. Independent board members were already whispering, brows furrowed over printed summaries. Behind me, my team of analysts filed in, all handpicked, all quietly embedded over the past 5 years, collecting data while the Lancaster heirs played legacy games. I stood at the podium. Good morning, I said smoothly. Shall we begin? Ava, Victoria said, her voice stripped of its edge. Before we get into this, maybe we could speak privately. I tilted my head slightly. I think we've had enough private family conversations, don't you? I nodded toward my team. Distribute the reports, please. Papers rustled like storm winds. Then, the sharp sounds of gasps. One board member swore under her breath. "This can't be right," muttered a director, flipping pages. "These losses? These numbers?" "Oh, they're accurate," I confirmed, pulling up my presentation. "Let's start with the creative accounting, shall we?" I looked at Marcus. "Would you like to explain how over $8 million in losses were tucked under miscellaneous operational expenses?" His lawyer began to object, but I raised a hand. "Or should we fast forward to the inflated client metrics, the phantom assets, or the part where, without VXC Holdings contracts, Lancaster Group is technically insolvent?" "You're trying to destroy us," Marcus said, voice cracking. I stared at him, unwavering. "No, Marcus, you did that on your own." "Think your own family," Marcus choked out. I raised an eyebrow. "Family? You mean when you told half the industry I wasn't cut out for corporate leadership, or when Aunt Victoria laughed and said I'd never understand real business?" "That was 6 years ago," Victoria said, a little too quickly. "Yes, it was. And while you were busy guarding the family crest and polishing old legacies, I was building something from scratch. Today, VXC Holdings is triple the size of Lancaster Group." I clicked to the next slide. Numbers didn't lie. A bar graph showed just how deep their dependency ran. 47% of your revenue is directly tied to VXC, I said evenly. Revenue that will vanish next Monday if I terminate our contract. The room erupted. Voices layered over each other. Chairs scraped. Lawyers huddled in panic. One board member actually swore aloud. And then Marcus broke. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered, slumping in his chair. "You can't just pull out, Ava." Victoria stood, face flushed with fury. "We'll take legal action." "On what grounds?" I asked, my voice turning cool. "That your rejected niece outperformed your entire executive suite? That your son's fraudulent reporting was uncovered before the SEC got involved?" I leaned forward. "By all means, let your lawyers depose Marcus. I'd love for them to explain the off-book liabilities and phantom revenue streams." A gray-haired board member cleared his throat. "Miss Chen, given the circumstances, we may need to discuss immediate leadership transitions." "Leadership transitions?" Marcus's voice cracked. "This is our company." "Actually," I said, sliding a sealed envelope onto the table, "not for long." Inside were 2 documents. "Option 1, I said, Lancaster Group agrees to a full restructuring. Marcus resigns, the board appoints independent leadership. We continue a scaled-down partnership with oversight." "And option 2, Victoria asked softly. "I walk. Every contract gone. And my legal team forwards our audit findings to federal regulators." I checked the time on my watch. "You have 1 hour. This isn't business," Marcus spat. "It's revenge." "No, cousin," I said quietly. "It's exactly what you said business was. Ruthless, merit-based, and only for those who can prove they belong." I gathered my tablet, my notes, my silence. "I'll be in the office. You once said I'd never deserve," I added, "the CEO suite. Funny how things change." I left them there, surrounded by reports, evidence, and panic. By the time I reached my private suite overlooking the harbor, my phone was vibrating nonstop. "Mom, how could you do this to your aunt?" "Dad, you're tearing the family apart." "My cousins, you've ruined us." I ignored them all. Instead, I opened a dusty folder buried in my inbox. The rejection email Victoria had sent me 6 years ago. "Dear Ava, while we admire your ambition, we feel you lack the leadership instincts required at Lancaster Group. Perhaps a role with fewer responsibilities would better suit your strength." I smiled and clicked Archive. "Sincerely, Victoria Lancaster." I printed the old rejection email and placed it on what would soon be my new desk. The board, now staring at undeniable evidence of Marcus's fraudulent reporting and the company's heavy reliance on VXC Holdings, had only one rational path forward: accept my terms, or lose everything. By sunset, it was done. Marcus resigned, his exit as quiet as it was overdue. Victoria, stripped of her influence, was pressured into an early retirement that no one in the room tried to fight, and Lancaster Group, once a fortress of nepotism and old money pride, would be restructured under my oversight. The family empire they once claimed I wasn't fit to join would now report to me. Michael stepped in just as the final papers were signed, a bottle of chilled champagne in hand. "Congratulations," he said with a grin, "on your very elegant takeover." "Not a takeover," I replied, watching through the window as Marcus and Victoria quietly packed their offices into cardboard boxes. "Just business, the kind they told me I'd never understand." My phone buzzed again. Dozens of unread messages. "Mom, you didn't have to humiliate them." "Dad, this isn't how family handles conflict." "Cousins. We grew up together. How could you?" I typed one message to the family group chat and hit send. "Don't worry about the family name. Lancaster Group is finally in qualified hands." Then I set the phone down and turned back to the window, watching the Pacific fade to orange and gold as the sun sank behind the skyline. A new kind of peace settled over me. Not the peace of approval or recognition, but the clarity of earned power. Because sometimes success isn't about getting the job you begged for. It's about building something so undeniable that they're forced to sit across the table and negotiate with you. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming their boss. Victoria had been right about one thing, though. I wasn't qualified to work at Lancaster Group. I was qualified to own it. Hey, before we dive into anything else, how was your day? Really? I know we don't always ask each other that, especially in a world moving this fast, but I'd love to know. Drop it in the comments. Good, bad, somewhere in between. I'm listening. Because sometimes just being heard is the first step to feeling seen. And if you've made it this far, I want to thank you, not just for listening to my story, but for walking through every hard-earned lesson with me. When I was told I wasn't good enough to sit at their table, I didn't fight for a seat. I built my own table, and eventually, they had no choice but to stand around mine. So now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated, overlooked, or shut out by people who were supposed to believe in you? Tell me how you kept going anyway. Or tell me where you are now, and I'll cheer you on like no one else did. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that quiet strength makes the loudest impact. If any part of this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Not just to support me, but to support yourself. Because stories like this aren't just about revenge or power plays. They're about finding your voice, honoring your worth, and rewriting your place in the world. Here's what I know now. You don't need permission to begin. You don't need approval to grow. And you definitely don't need anyone's blessing to become who you were always meant to be. So go ahead, archive that rejection, build what they said you couldn't, and when they finally recognize you, make sure it's because you refused to disappear. Until then, I'll be right here, sharing stories like mine and waiting to hear yours. Because sometimes, the best success story starts with a no you turned into power.